Before we dive in, a heads up. This story touches on mature themes: new motherhood's raw edges, tangled family ties, and forbidden lines blurring. If that's too heavy or unsettling, feel free to step away now. The living room glowed soft in the dawn's pale light, filtering through gauzy curtains, casting faint patterns across the hardwood I knelt on. My yoga mat stretched out beneath me, its rubbery grip cool against my palms as I pressed into it, breathing deep, steady, the quiet hum of the world waking beyond our little brick house in Portland. This place, cozy, sun-warmed, was the prize of years scraping by, a haven carved out for me and Eli after the grind of barely making it. Stability had been a phantom back then, a dream I chased through dingy rentals and endless shifts, but now it was solid, real, almost too still in its calm. Years ago it was just us, Eli and me, bound tight in spaces so cramped the walls felt alive, breathing down our necks. I'd perch on frayed cushions, legs tucked under, staring at overdue notices, my chest tight as I rationed the last crumpled bills. Eli, toddling then, would catch the strain in my silence and clamber onto me, his small hands patting my face, voice a chirpy, "It's okay, Mama." He shouldn't have felt that weight, shouldn't have known the fear I masked, but he did. Those hazel eyes, keen, too wise, saw through me, and somehow his trust pulled us through, stubborn and unshakable. His dad bailed before Eli's first birthday. No drama, no slammed doors, just a quiet fade into the dusk, leaving nothing but absence. I'd study Eli's face as he grew, half dreading I'd spot that man's cold distance, but Eli was fire where his father was ice, steady where he'd run. We forged something tough in those lean days, truths laid bare and tiny rooms where secrets couldn't hide. Eli asked anything, fearless, and I answered, raw and real. He'd spill his little sins, swiped cookies, a playground shove, and I'd listen, his faith my anchor. He shot up fast, all lanky limbs and quiet strength, filling doorways, but he stayed close. While his buddies chased chaos, bonfires, risky bets, Eli lingered, sprawled on our thrift store couch, tossing me dumb puns that cracked me up despite myself. I clung to that, maybe too hard, the bond we'd built, a lifeline through the years. It's why I'd thrown myself into yoga. Dawn flows on the mat, breath sinking with each stretch, muscles taut and alive. It wasn't just health, it was power, a shield after bending so long without breaking. The mirror showed a woman remade, toned, fierce, vibrant, and eyes followed me. But it was my own stare that counted, seeing strength where weakness once hid. That grit bought us this house, bright, open, a leap from the claustrophobic past. I'd earned it, every shingle, and I wouldn't apologize. Eli deserved it too, room to grow after years of squeezing through. Then came the yoga nook, a corner I'd claimed with a mat, a diffuser puffing lavender, a splurge that felt wild after pinching pennies. When I showed Eli, he flashed that easy grin, "Nice one, Mom." I figured he'd shrug it off, but I loved it. Rolling out the mat at dawn, flowing through poses, sweat beading as I held plank, a quiet win over the old shadows. By Saturday, I wanted him to see it, dropped hints all morning about the calm, the stretch, teasing he'd like it. He brushed it off. Not my scene, but after coffee, when I nudged again, he caved. "All right, let's do it." It should have been simple, just yoga with my son, but as I slipped upstairs to change, a shiver prickled my skin. I pulled on a teal sports bra and leggings, fabric hugging tight, and lingered in the mirror, adjusting the straps, smoothing my auburn hair, my reflection sharp, alive. I told myself it was just eagerness, the mat, the morning, but my hands trembled faintly as I grabbed water bottles, the plastic cool in my grip, and headed down. The air hung crisp, the faintest chill brushing through the cracked window as I unrolled my mat, setting the bottles by its edge. Eli was already there, leaning against the couch, barefoot in gym shorts and a faded tee, his broad frame loose, hazel eyes catching the light in a rare stillness. "Told you it's chill," I said, kicking off my socks, peeling off my hoodie, the sports bra bold against my skin, leggings clinging as I stretched my arms. His gaze flicked up, quick, a breath, then dropped to the floor, but I caught it, a spark, and my pulse jumped, sharp and sudden. I stepped onto the mat, breath sinking with the stretch, and sank into downward dog, pretending it was nothing, just yoga with my son, though the air felt thicker, charged, a shift I couldn't place. The mat gripped my palms as I flowed into plank, muscles humming, the morning light spilling soft over us, Eli settling onto a spare mat beside me, mirroring my pose with an easy shrug. "See? Not bad," I teased, holding the stretch, sweat beading faint on my brow, the sports bra snug as I breathed deep. He smirked, shifting his weight. "Better than I thought." His voice low, steady, a calm softening his edges. I moved into cobra, chest lifting, the teal fabric taut across me, his eyes darting up, a quick graze, then back to his mat, but the room shifted, a ripple I felt in my bones. "Hogging the good vibes?" I grinned, sliding closer, my mat nudging his, the air humming faint between us. He tilted his head. "Found the groove. Don't want to lose it." Playful, light, but something laced it and I laughed. Greedy. Guess I'll steal it. The banter flowed, an echo of our old nights, him sprawling over the couch, me nudging him off. But here, it slowed, the mat's grip anchoring every move, the quiet stretching long. "Try me," he said, grinning, and I slid nearer, testing his plank, my shoulder brushing his, the warmth of him seeping through, a shiver racing up my arm, sharp and uncalled. We swapped poses, my breath catching as I settled into warrior, legs spread firm, his gaze flicking, brief, bold, to my thighs, then away, a flush creeping up his neck. "Move it," I teased, nudging his arm, and he swatted back, "Stay in your lane." Laughing as I lunged, playful, my hands catching his shoulders, firm under my grip. "You'll lose it," he warned, but I pressed, teasing, and we tangled, mats sliding, my fingers slipping on his damp tee, his laugh cutting sharp as I landed close, too close, straddling his lap without meaning to, the air freezing hard. My heart slammed, his frame tensing beneath me, a firmness pressing through his shorts, undeniable, electric. "Sorry," he muttered, voice shaky, face red, eyes darting off. "Didn't mean—" I cut in. "It's fine, Eli, just the pose." But my tone wobbled, betraying the thrill flickering wild in my chest. His shoulders stayed stiff, hazel eyes fixed on the hardwood, cheeks flushed a deep red. And I felt it too. A stab of guilt, cold and quick, but beneath it a spark I hadn't expected, alive and insistent, tugging at me as I straightened, smoothing my leggings, pretending calm. "Guess I should have kept my spot," I said, breaking the quiet, scooting back to my mat, the rubber cool under my palms as I sank into child's pose, stretching long, trying to lighten the weight hanging between us. He laughed, short, nervous. "Yeah, maybe," and stood, muttering about water, his bare feet padding soft across the floor, disappearing into the kitchen. I stayed low, forehead to the mat, breath sinking with the stretch, but my skin buzzed, replaying it. The firmness of him beneath me, his wide-eyed flush, the heat that wasn't just the yoga. It's nothing, I told myself, a fluke, closeness. But the lie felt flimsy, cracking as the thrill pulsed louder, whispering, "What if?" I rolled up my mat that night, the house settling into dusk, the diffuser's lavender faint as I climbed into bed, the sheets crisp against my still warm skin. Eli's flustered sorry looped in my head, a sound I couldn't shake, and my pulse thrummed wild, tracing the press of him, the way his eyes darted, raw and unguarded. Sleep dodged me, the brick walls creaking soft, the fridge's hum downstairs a steady beat matching my own. David's text, "Back soon," glowed unread on my phone, a chilly anchor to a life that felt far off, fading against the spark Eli ignited, a pull I shouldn't crave but couldn't quiet. Morning broke gray, mist clinging to the pines outside, and I slipped downstairs, barefoot, the hardwood cool under my soles. Eli leaned against the kitchen counter, coffee steaming in his mug, gym shorts slung low, his dark hair tousled from sleep. "Hey," he said, voice soft, eyes flicking to me, quick, wary, then back to his drink. "Hey," I echoed, grabbing a cup, my hands steadying on the warm ceramic, last night's heat a silent thread between us. "Sleep okay?" I asked, stirring cream I didn't want, and he shrugged. "Yeah, you?" His tone aimed for light, but his gaze lingered, a beat too long, and my stomach flipped, sharp and sudden. Breakfast blurred, Sarah's voice cutting in, planning a market trip, the clatter of plates, and I played along, nodding at her chatter, but Eli's presence pulled at me. He sat across, his knee brushing mine under the table once, accidental but electric, a jolt that made me spill my coffee, the dark splash staining my sleeve. "Still a klutz?" Sarah teased, oblivious, and he smirked, faint, passing me a napkin, his fingers grazing mine, warm and rough, a spark that hitched my breath. I wiped at the mess, cheeks burning, his eyes catching mine, steady, a glint of something new, and I turned away, guilt prickling, but the thrill pulsed stronger, a hum I couldn't silence. Days slipped into a rhythm, Sarah bustling through errands, me flowing through dawn yoga, Eli tinkering in the garage, but the air between us thickened, heavy with what we didn't say. I'd catch him watching, his gaze tracing my legs as I stretched post-flow, my tank top clinging damp, or flicking to my neck when I tied my hair, quick but deliberate. It started subtle, a game I didn't plan, swapping joggers for leggings that hugged my curves, picking cropped tops that bared my midriff, moving slower when he was near. I'd bend to adjust my mat, lingering, feel his eyes follow and smile inside, a rush tightening my core. He didn't call it out, not yet, but I saw it, the way his jaw clenched, his hands flexing as he passed me in the hall, closer than needed, his arm brushing my side, warm through my shirt. "Careful, Mom," he said one morning, smirking as I stretched into bridge pose, leggings taut, reaching for my water. "You'll tip over." I straightened, rolling my eyes. "After all these years, you'd think you'd trust my balance." His grin faltered, eyes dipping quick to my chest, then away. "Doesn't mean I don't notice." The words landed heavy, casual, but sharp, and I froze, heat flooding my face, turning to hide the flush, the thrill sparking brighter, dangerous, and alive. That evening, the mat called again. No nudge this time. Eli grabbed water and a towel before I could ask. A silent pact, and I chose a coral sports bra, smaller, bolder, its straps thin, fabric snug, paired with black leggings, tight and sleek. The living room glowed dim, the sky bruising purple outside, and I unrolled my mat, breath sinking as I sank into cat-cow, the stretch warm, grounding. He joined, eyes flicking down, a heartbeat enough, and handed me my bottle. "Damn, Mom, that's barely holding you in." His tone teased, but his cheeks flushed, and I laughed, arching deeper. "Oh, hush. Wouldn't want to shock you." He smirked. "More shocking for you, trust me." And the words hung, heavier than the air, a pulse flickering between us. I flowed into warrior, legs firm, the coral bra taut as I stretched, teasing. "Gonna hog the good stretch again?" He shook his head, firm. "Not after last time." I tilted my head, pressing, "What happened last time?" His face reddened, eyes darting off. "You know, things got weird." I laughed, too loud. "Flattered," and he flushed deeper, muttering, "Yeah, well." Before stepping back, sweat beading on his brow, his shorts clinging as he headed for the kitchen, my gaze trailing lower than it should have, a thrill surging as he vanished, leaving me on the mat, breath shaky, the game alive, teetering on an edge I couldn't name. The yoga mat's faint rubber scent lingered as I folded it that night. Eli's flushed retreat, his, "Yeah, well," and the cling of his shorts, replaying sharp in my mind, a spark I couldn't snuff out. I woke the next morning, dawn spilling soft through the blinds, the sheets twisted from restless dreams, my skin still tingling with the memory of his gaze, quick and bold. Downstairs, Sarah hummed in the kitchen, her voice a distant drone as I poured coffee, my hands steadying on the mug. But Eli's absence pulled at me, a quiet ache even with him out grabbing groceries. David's text, "Home tomorrow," flashed on my phone, a cold jolt I ignored, his shadow dimming against the heat Eli stirred, a heat I shouldn't chase but couldn't resist. Days slipped by, the house a hum of routine, Sarah's market runs, my dawn flows, Eli's tools clanking in the garage, but the air between us thickened, a silent thread weaving through every glance. I leaned into it, subtle at first, leggings swapped for shorts that hugged my thighs, tanks traded for cropped tees, the fabric taut across my chest, no bra beneath. I'd stretch longer after yoga, catching his eyes linger on my legs, or bend to adjust the diffuser, slow and deliberate, feeling his gaze trace my spine. He didn't call it out, but he mirrored it, his hand brushing my arm, grabbing a glass, his voice low. "Watch it, Mom," as I passed too close in the hall, a warmth that prickled my skin. Winter crept in, the air sharp beyond the windows, fairy lights twinkling on a pine Sarah insisted we string up together. The tension shifted, jokes grew bolder, glances held longer, a charge pulsing beneath our banter. "Careful, Mom," he said one evening, smirking as I leaned over the couch in a cropped hoodie, shorts riding high, adjusting a light. "You'll tangle those up." I straightened, tossing back. "You've seen worse messes," but his eyes dipped, quick, sharp, to my chest. "Doesn't mean I don't notice." And I turned away, heat flooding my face, the thrill coiling tighter, a game we didn't name. Then came the yoga deck, a gift I'd ordered, a sleek wooden platform delivered post-holidays, a treat for years of hustle. Eli offered to assemble it, his hands quick with screws, and I lingered in the doorway, leaning against the frame in a crop top and shorts, watching sweat bead on his bare shoulders as he worked. "Oh, Mr. Handy," I teased, trailing a finger down his arm, warm and firm under my touch. "How will I thank you?" He laughed, brushing it off. "Keep wishing." But his eyes flicked to my thighs, a quick graze, before he turned back, the air crackling with something unspoken, alive. The next day, it stood ready, wood smooth and cool, and I nudged him after lunch. "You built it. Try it with me." He hesitated, rubbing his neck. "Maybe," but I pressed, "Come on, you earned it." And he caved, a grin breaking free. I chose a violet sports bra and shorts, the fabric thin, clinging damp from a run, no bra beneath, and stepped onto the deck, the morning crisp, grounding. Eli followed, gym shorts low, no shirt, his chest broad and tan, sweat already sheen as he settled beside me, our thighs brushing in the tight space, a jolt that hitched my breath. The air thickened, pine and mist swirling around us, the stretch sinking deep into my muscles, loosening me as I flowed into warrior, eyes half closed. "Nice work," I said, stretching my arms, the crop top riding up, baring my midriff, and he grinned. "Glad you like it." His voice was low, warm, and I shifted, teasing, "This spot's perfect. Plank on the mat, stretch here. You're spoiling me." He laughed. "Someone's gotta." And I nudged him, playful, my knee pressing to his, the damp warmth of his skin igniting me, a shiver racing up my spine despite the chill. "Could use help with a stretch, though," he said, smirking, leaning closer, his shoulder brushing mine, and I blinked, caught off guard. "Which one?" He waved it off, grinning. Kidding, but I pressed. "Oh, thought our friend was back," nodding at his shorts, teasing, bold. His eyes widened, then dipped, quick, sharp, to my chest, the violet bra clinging, nipples faint through the fabric, and he shot back, "You're not exactly subtle either." I laughed, leaning forward, natural after a flow, and he grinned, but the air shifted, heavy, charged, our breaths sinking in the mist. The deck creaked, breaking the spell, and he stood first, brushing against me as he stepped off, his arm warm, slick with sweat, a spark that lingered as I followed, my skin buzzing, the pine scent clinging to us both. "Maybe I'll join your next flow," he said, grinning over his shoulder, and I smiled. "I'd like that." The words heavier than I meant, a promise threading through the chill, a line I danced closer to, unsure if I'd pull back. That night, the deck's cool wood haunted me as I slipped into bed, sheets crisp against my flushed skin, Eli's grin, "Maybe I'll join your next flow," echoing soft, a thread I couldn't untangle. His bare chest, sweat slick in the dawn, the brush of his thigh replayed in the dark, my pulse thudding wild beneath the covers. The yoga deck's pine scent clung to me as I climbed into bed, the sheets cool against my flushed skin, Eli's "maybe I'll join your next flow" looping in my mind, a tether I couldn't cut. His bare chest, glistening in the dawn, the graze of his thigh against mine, replayed in the dark, my pulse a restless thud under the quilt. His shadow fading against the heat Eli sparked, a heat I shouldn't chase but couldn't shake. I tossed, the memory of his eyes, hazel, bold, tracing me, igniting a thrill I couldn't hush. Morning dawned gray, fog pressing thick beyond the pines, and I padded downstairs, barefoot, the hardwood chilled under my soles. Eli stood in the kitchen, coffee brewing, gym shorts low, a tee stretched across his broad frame, his dark hair mussed from sleep. "Hey," he said, voice soft, eyes flicking to me, quick, warm, then back to the pot. "Hey," I echoed, grabbing a mug, my fingers brushing his as he passed the sugar, a spark that hitched my breath. "Yoga today?" he asked, sipping his coffee, casual, and I nodded. "If you're game," smiling too fast, the air humming with yesterday's charge. Breakfast blurred, Sarah's chatter about a craft fair, the clink of spoons, and I nodded along, but Eli's presence tugged at me. He sat across, his knee nudging mine under the table, a fleeting jolt that raced up my leg, and I laughed too loud at Sarah's joke, spilling my mug, the dark splash staining my napkin. "Still a mess," she teased, oblivious, and he smirked, passing a cloth, his fingers grazing mine, warm and rough, a flush creeping up my cheeks. I dabbed at it, his gaze lingering, steady, a glint of something sharp, and I turned away, guilt prickling, the thrill pulsing brighter. Days stretched tight, a quiet dance of nearness, Sarah bustling through chores, me flowing at dawn, Eli tinkering in the garage. But the game deepened. I wore cropped tees, shorts hugging my thighs, moved slower when he was near, catching his eyes trace my spine as I bent to adjust the deck, his breath catching when I stretched, tank top riding up. He leaned in too, his hand brushing my hip in the hall, his voice low. "Careful, Mom," as I passed close, a warmth that prickled my skin. "Gonna trip me up," he teased one afternoon, smirking as I leaned over the counter, shorts tight, grabbing a glass, and I tossed back, "You've dodged worse." But his eyes dipped, bold, quick, to my chest. "Not always." And I turned, heat flooding me, the thrill tightening. That evening, David's text buzzed. "Landing tonight?" A cold nod I pushed aside, the house settling into dusk, Sarah napping upstairs. I slipped into the kitchen, rinsing lunch dishes, my tank top damp from yoga, shorts clinging to my thighs, no bra beneath, the fabric thin against my skin. Eli came up behind, silent, his hand brushing my lower back as he reached for a mug, a quick, deliberate press, warm through my shirt, and I froze, heat rushing to my face, the sponge slipping in my grip. "Your headlights are on," he said, nodding at my chest, smirking, his voice low, teasing, and I turned, catching his gaze. "Oh, you noticed?" My tone aimed for light, but it trembled, betraying me. He paused, mug in hand, eyes searching mine, hazel, uncertain, and the air thickened, the fridge's hum loud in the hush. "Hard not to," he said, casual but heavy, stepping closer, his breath a faint rhythm between us. My stomach flipped, a thrill surging, and I leaned back, the counter cool against my spine. "What's okay to say?" he asked, voice softer, testing, a question that hung heavy. I swallowed, the room shrinking, his nearness a pull I couldn't dodge. "Words don't matter," I said, meeting his eyes. "Say what you want. If it's too much, we'll laugh it off." Relief flickered in his gaze, but tension lingered, his hands flexing like he ached to move. "What about touching?" I pressed. Bold, the words slipping free, my pulse hammering. He paused, swallowing hard. I don't know. His voice cracking faintly, and I stepped closer, the counter digging into my back. I'm fine with hands. On my hips, if I can do the same. He laughed, sharp and nervous, but nodded. Deal. And the air sparked, a line blurring we couldn't unsee. I turned back to the sink, feigning calm, but my skin buzzed, his eyes still on me. And later, stacking plates, his hand brushed my hip again. Quick, deliberate, a jolt that made me straighten, bumping into him, his chest warm, solid behind me. Someone's brave, I said, voice low, turning to face him, wide-eyed, and he didn't step back, pressing just enough for me to feel him, close, real. You said it's okay, he shot back, face red, eyes steady, and I smirked. It is. Stepping aside, the heat lingering as he headed out to meet friends, leaving me breathless, the thrill pulsing wild. David's plane was landing soon, a storm brewing, but for now it was just us. The kitchen a quiet arena of what we'd dared, a game I couldn't quit. The kitchen's warmth stayed with me as I climbed the stairs, Eli's hand on my hip, a fleeting, firm press, burning in my mind, his "you said it's okay," echoing soft and bold. I sank onto the bed, the quilt cool against my flushed skin, my tank top clinging damp, shorts tight. David's text, landed home soon, glowed on my phone, a weight I couldn't face, his shadow creeping closer, but Eli's presence drowned it, his smirk, his nearness, a thrill I shouldn't chase but couldn't release. The kitchen's heat clung to me as I climbed the stairs, Eli's hand on my hip, a warm, fleeting press, searing in my memory, his "you said it's okay," ringing soft and daring. I sank onto the bed, quilt cool against my flushed skin, tank top damp from the sink, shorts snug on my thighs. David's text, landed, home soon, glowed unread on my phone, a cold tether I couldn't face, his shadow inching closer, but Eli's presence swallowed it. His smirk, his closeness, a pull I shouldn't want but couldn't shake. Sleep dodged me, the house creaking in the dark, my pulse thudding wild as I replayed the night, the line we'd blurred, a game I'd pushed too far. Sarah's snores drifted faint from upstairs, the air thick with winter chill, and I slipped downstairs, barefoot, the hardwood icy under my soles, my robe loose over the tank top and shorts. The living room lay dim, a single lamp casting soft shadows, and I sank onto the couch, legs stretched out, craving calm, craving air. Footsteps creaked behind, slow, steady, and I turned, heart lurching as Eli stepped in, gym shorts low, tee stretched across his chest, his dark hair mussed, eyes locking mine in the faint glow. "Can't sleep?" he asked, voice low, warm, settling beside me, his thigh brushing mine, a spark that hitched my breath. "Yeah," I murmured, shifting closer, the couch creaking under us, his warmth seeping through the thin gap. "You?" He shrugged. "Too much spinning up here," tapping his temple, his gaze flicking to me, quick, sharp, then away, the kitchen pulsing between us. I stretched my legs across his lap, an old habit from simpler days, but the air shifted, heavier, his hand hovering near my ankle, fingers flexing like he ached to touch. "Tough day?" I teased, voice soft, and he smirked. "You could say that?" His eyes tracing my legs, lingering where my shorts rode up, a thrill tightening my chest. Silence stretched, the TV flickering muted across the room, and he moved, slow, deliberate, his hand resting light on my ankle, tracing lazy circles with his thumb, warm and rough against my skin. My breath caught, the touch igniting me, but I didn't pull away, couldn't, the heat of him sinking deeper, stirring a hunger I'd buried. "Eli," I started a whisper, but he looked up, eyes dark, raw. "I don't get this," he said, voice quiet, shaky. "Us. It's messing with me." His hand stilled, gripping my ankle, grounding himself, and my stomach twisted, the truth pressing close. I pulled my legs back, sitting up to face him, the couch shifting under me, our knees brushing, Close. Too close. "You're not alone," I admitted, my voice loud in the stillness. "I'm wrestling with it too." He met my gaze, something unguarded flickering there. "It's not just me, right? I'm not making it up?" His words hung heavy, and I shook my head. "No, you're not." The confession spilling out, raw, real, a line I couldn't uncross. The room shrank, the air thick with what we'd dared to voice, his hands flexing on his knees, my skin buzzing where he'd touched, a pull I couldn't dodge. "I feel like I'm losing it," he said, dragging a hand through his hair. "Every time you're around, I can't stop thinking about you." His voice cracked, soft, and my breath hitched, heat flooding me, words I'd felt but never said. "It's the same for me," I said, trembling. "It scares me, but it lights me up." The truth landed, stark, and he leaned back, head falling against the couch. "God, Mom," exhaling sharp, hands sliding down his face, then looking at me, eyes searching, fear, want, a plea. I leaned closer, my hand resting on his arm, warm, firm. "We'll keep it easy," I said, soft. "No pressure, just this. If it's too much, we stop." He nodded, relief flickering, but the tension held, his eyes dark, conflicted, mirroring mine. "Yeah," he murmured, staring at the TV, unseeing. "It feels good." The words hung, a quiet vow, and I shifted, my legs brushing his again, his hand sliding back to my ankle, tracing slow, steady circles, a spark reigniting. The night pulsed around us, wind rattling the pines, the lamp's glow faint, and I leaned into him, shoulder to his warmth anchoring me, a game we'd agreed to play, teetering on a brink I couldn't retreat from. Then headlights sliced the drive, sharp, sudden, David's car, tires crunching gravel loud, and my heart froze, Eli's hand stilling on my skin. "Shit," I hissed, pulling back, panic surging as the engine died, footsteps thudding toward the porch. Eli stood, eyes wide. "He's early." Voice low, and I scrambled, robe slipping as I straightened, the thrill shattering into fear, David's key scraping the lock, a storm breaking in, leaving us raw, teetering on an edge we couldn't climb back from. The living room stilled as David's key turned, his steps heavy outside. Eli's hand slipping from my ankle, a cold jolt cutting through the heat we'd spun. "He's early," Eli whispered, voice tight, eyes flashing panic. And I lurched up, robe falling open, tank top clinging damp, my pulse hammering as the door creaked wide. David stepped in, tall, travel-worn, jacket slung over his arm, eyes narrowing at the dim light. "Lena?" he called, voice rough, scanning the room, landing on us, me on the couch, Eli by the lamp, too close, too tense. "Up late?" he asked, an edge slicing through, and I forced a smile. Couldn't sleep, my voice thin, shaky. The living room froze as David's voice cut through. "Up late?" His eyes narrowing in the dim glow, landing on me, sprawled on the couch, robe slipping open, and Eli hovering by the lamp, too close, too still. "Couldn't sleep," I said, forcing a smile, my voice thin, trembling as I tugged the robe shut, the tank top clinging damp beneath. Eli nodded, casual. "Just chilling," but his hands flexed, betraying him, and David grunted, dropping his bag. "Long flight, bed's calling." His gaze lingered, a beat too long. Then he trudged upstairs, boots creaking on the steps, leaving me breathless, Eli's eyes meeting mine, dark, tense, a silent thread holding us. "Close one," he murmured, stepping back, and I nodded. Too close. The thrill and fear tangling tight, his warmth still pulsing where he'd touched. I retreated to my room, the quilt cool against my flushed skin, David's snores starting faint down the hall, a heavy rhythm that pinned me to the bed. Sleep dodged me, Eli's ankle-tracing thumb replaying in the dark, the heat of him clashing with David's cold shadow, a pull I couldn't shake as I tossed, restless. Morning broke gray, fog thick outside, and I slipped downstairs, barefoot, the hardwood chilled. David sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming, Sarah bustling with toast, and I played normal, nodding at his gruff morning. But Eli's presence simmered beneath, his chair empty, a quiet ache I couldn't name. He appeared later, gym shorts low, tea stretched across his chest, settling across from me, his knee brushing mine under the table, a quick electric graze that made my mug wobble, coffee sloshing. "Rough night?" David asked, eyeing me over his cup, and I shrugged. Restless, avoiding his stare, guilt sharp, the thrill sharper. Eli smirked faintly, silent, but his eyes flicked to me, bold, knowing, and I turned away, heat prickling my skin, David's shadow a cold weight I couldn't lift. Sarah chattered on, oblivious, planning a day out, and I nodded, distracted. Eli's nearness a pulse I couldn't dodge. Days stretched taut. David settling into routines, Sarah clueless, me caught between. But the tension with Eli deepened, a quiet defiance in stolen moments. A hand on my hip in the hall, his breath warm as he leaned close. Careful, teasing low, my shorts riding high, his touch lingering, sparking me. "You're trouble," I whispered, smirking, and he grinned. "You kicked it off." The air humming, a game we couldn't quit. Night brought David's snores beside me, his arm heavy, a stranger's weight, and I'd lie awake. Eli's warmth a ghost against the chill, my skin aching for what I shouldn't crave. One afternoon, Sarah out shopping, David napping. The house sank into a thick hush, and I unrolled my mat in the living room, needing the stretch, needing air. The diffuser puffed lavender, the hardwood cool under my bare feet, robe loose over my tank top and shorts. I flowed into downward dog, breath sinking when Eli stepped in. Gym shorts low, no shirt, his chest broad, tan in the faint light, and stopped, eyes locking mine, a spark flaring. "Solo yoga?" he asked, voice low, stepping closer, and I straightened. "Could use a partner." My tone light, but it trembled, betraying me. He smirked. "Thought you'd never ask," and grabbed the spare mat, unrolling it beside mine, his bare shoulder brushing me as he settled into plank, sweat already beading. The air thickened, lavender and pine swirling, and I flowed into warrior, legs firm, the tank top riding up, bearing my midriff. "Nice form," he said, grinning, his voice warm, and I nudged him, playful. "Keep up." My knee pressing his, the damp warmth of his skin igniting me, a shiver racing up my spine despite the stretch. We moved, cat-cow, bridge, his eyes tracing my thighs, lingering where the shorts clung, a thrill coiling tight in my core. "Need a spot?" he teased, leaning closer, his hand hovering near my hip as I arched into bridge, and I laughed. "Think you can handle it?" He grinned. "Try me." And his hand settled, light, deliberate, on my hip, warm through the fabric, steadying me as I held the pose, my breath catching sharp. "Eli," I started, voice soft, but he shifted, eyes dark. "Can't stop noticing you," he murmured, raw, and I froze, the room shrinking, his touch a pull I couldn't dodge. "Same here," I whispered, trembling, the confession slipping free, a line blurring fast. We sank into child's pose, Matt's close, his hand sliding to my lower back, slow, firm, pressing me deeper, a jolt sparking through me. "This okay?" he asked, voice low, testing, and I nodded. "Yeah." My breath shaky, the heat of him sinking in, stirring a hunger I couldn't bury. The diffuser hummed, the house silent save our breaths, and I leaned into his touch, the stretch a mask for something deeper, teetering on an edge we couldn't unsee. Then footsteps thudded upstairs, heavy, sudden, David's voice rumbling, "Lena?" My heart stopped, Eli's hand freezing, panic surging as the stairs creaked, a storm breaking in, leaving us exposed, breathless on the mats. Breath catching sharp as I straightened from child's pose, the mat creaking beneath me, Eli scrambling back, his hazel eyes wide with panic. "He's up," he hissed, voice low, and I nodded, robe slipping as I stood, tank top clinging damp, pulse hammering wild. The door swung open, David filling the frame, rumpled from sleep, eyes narrowing at us, me mid-stretch, Eli too close, mats askew. "Yoga this late?" he asked, voice gruff, an edge cutting through, and I forced a laugh. Couldn't unwind. My tone shaky, thin. Eli grabbed his mat, rolling it fast. "Just stretching," he muttered, avoiding David's stare, but his hands trembled, betraying him. David grunted, looks intense, his gaze lingering, sharp, too long, then turned to the kitchen. "Coffee's on?" I nodded. "Yeah." Breathless, and he shuffled off, leaving the air thick, Eli's eyes meeting mine, dark, tense, a silent spark flickering. "That was close," I whispered, folding my mat, and he nodded. "Too damn close." Stepping back, the warmth of his touch still pulsing on my skin, a thrill and fear knotting tight as I retreated upstairs. Night settled heavy, David's snores a steady drone beside me, his arm a dead weight across the quilt, pinning me to the bed. Sleep dodged me, Eli's hand on my back replaying, firm, warm, the confession, "Can't stop noticing you," echoing raw in the dark. My skin ached, caught between David's cold shadow and Eli's heat. A pull I shouldn't crave but couldn't shake. Dawn broke gray, fog clinging to the pines, and I slipped out barefoot, unrolling my mat in the quiet, needing the stretch, needing space. Sarah bustled downstairs oblivious, but Eli's absence tugged at me, a silent thread I couldn't cut. Days dragged. David back to work, Sarah chattering about winter plans, but the tension with Eli simmered, a quiet rebellion in fleeting glances. His hand brushing my hip in the hall, his voice low, "Careful, Mom." As I bent to grab a towel, shorts tight, his touch sparking me. "You're pushing it," I teased, smirking, and he grinned. "You set the pace," the air humming, a game we couldn't quit. I leaned into it, cropped tees swapped for tighter tanks, shorts hugging my thighs, stretching slow when he was near, catching his eyes trace my spine, his breath hitching. David's presence loomed, but Eli's pull drowned it, a heat I couldn't dodge. One night, Sarah out late, David asleep. The house sank into a deep hush, and I padded downstairs, restless, the hardwood cool under my bare feet, robe loose over my tank top and shorts. The living room glowed dim, the diffuser silent, and I sank onto the couch, needing air, needing calm. Eli emerged from the shadows, gym shorts low, no shirt, his chest broad, tan in the faint moonlight, and stopped, eyes locking mine, a spark flaring. "Can't sleep?" he asked, voice low, stepping closer, and I shook my head. "You neither?" He smirked. "Too much noise up here," tapping his temple, the space shrinking, his scent, sweat, pine flooding me. "Come upstairs," I whispered, bold, reckless, standing before he could answer, my pulse racing as I climbed, his steps soft behind, a shadow trailing me to my room. The door clicked shut, moonlight spilling silver through the blinds, and I faced him, robe slipping open, tank top thin against my skin. "Eli," I started, voice trembling, but he closed the gap, his hand brushing my cheek, warm, steady. "I can't fight this," he murmured, eyes dark, raw, and our lips met. Slow, tentative, tasting of night and him, then deep, his mouth opening to mine, a quiet groan as his tongue grazed mine, igniting me. I pressed into him, hands sliding to his chest, fingers tracing the firm planes, warm under my touch, pulling him closer as his arms wrapped me, pressing me against the door, its cool wood a shock to my back. His chest brushed mine, the friction sparking through the thin fabric, and I sighed, soft, my fingers digging into his shoulders, nails grazing as he kissed me deeper, lips trailing to my neck, warm and slow, sucking gently at the pulse, a shiver racing through me. "You're all I think about," he whispered, breath hot, his hands sliding to my hips, warm through the shorts, pulling me tighter, a spark flaring low. The room blurred, moonlight on the quilt, the floor's faint creak, and he tugged my tank top up, slow, deliberate, baring my midriff, his fingers brushing my skin, rough, electric. I lifted my arms, letting it slip off, and his gaze roamed, dark, reverent, his breath hitching as he kissed my collarbone, soft, warm, a quiet hum against me. My hands roamed his back, nails trailing faint lines, and he pressed closer, his shorts brushing my thighs, the heat of him alive, a pull I couldn't resist. David snores a distant hum, the night hours, teetering on a breaking point we couldn't undo. His lips lingered on my collarbone, breath warm, unraveling me, and I tugged at his shorts, fingers fumbling the waistband, needing him closer, needing more. He stepped back, eyes searching, a silent question, and I nodded, breathless, pulling him to the bed, the mattress dipping as we sank down, quilt bunching beneath, his weight settling over me, a heat I surrendered to, reckless, alive. My tank top lay crumpled on the floor, moonlight spilling silver across my bare skin, his hands on my hips, rough, steady, pulling me tight, the heat of his chest searing through the thin space between us. "I can't fight this," he'd murmured, voice raw, and I hadn't wanted him to. My hands roaming his back, nails trailing faint lines, his scent, pine, sweat, him, drowning David's distant snores. The room pulsed with us, a fragile haven teetering on collapse, and I gave in, reckless, alive. "Eli," I whispered, voice trembling, tugging at his shorts, fingers fumbling the waistband, craving him closer. He stepped back, eyes dark, searching, a silent question, and I nodded, breathless, pulling him back as he slid them off, the fabric rustling to the floor, leaving him bare, warm, solid against me. His hands moved to my shorts, hooking the hem, peeling them down slow with my panties, the air cool against my thighs as I stepped free, exposed, trembling under his gaze. He paused, breath hitching. "You're sure?" Voice low, ragged, and I pressed into him, legs parting. "Yes," a whisper, my hands gripping his shoulders, nails digging in, guiding him to the bed. The mattress dipped as we sank down, quilt bunching beneath me, his weight settling over me, warm and steady, his chest brushing mine, the friction igniting a flush across my skin. Our lips crashed, deep, hungry, his mouth opening to mine, tasting of night and want, his tongue grazing mine, slow and firm, a quiet moan slipping from me as I arched, pressing closer. His hands slid to my hips, rough palms gripping me, guiding me as he pressed in, slow, deliberate, a low groan escaping him, warm and full against me, my breath catching sharp at the stretch, a spark coiling tight in my core. "Lena," he panted, voice breaking, forehead resting on mine, and I clung to him, legs wrapping his hips, urging him deeper. The bed creaked, a steady rhythm building as he moved, gentle at first, his breath hot on my neck, lips kissing the hollow of my throat, then firmer, deeper, each thrust a pulse that stoked the fire within me. My hands roamed his back, nails scraping faint trails, sweat beating between us as I rocked against him, the friction of his chest on mine sparking through me, nipples tight against his skin. "God, you feel," he groaned, low, raw, his lips trailing to my ear, sucking gently, the heat of his breath a shiver down my spine, and I gasped, "Don't stop!" Voice trembling, my hands gripping his hair, thick and curling, tugging as the tension built, sharp and wild. Moonlight danced over us, silver streaks on his shoulders, the quilt a tangled mess as our rhythm quickened, his hands sliding to my thighs, lifting me closer, pressing deeper, the creak of the bed loud in the hush, the pine's whisper faint beyond. His lips found mine again, messy, desperate, his tongue mirroring the pace, a dance that spun my head, the heat of him overwhelming, alive against me. "I've wanted this," he panted, breath ragged, hands tightening on my hips, fingers digging in, grounding me as the edge rushed near, and I moaned, soft, clinging to him. Me too. The confession spilling free, raw, real. The world shrank. The room, the night, just us, sweat slick and tangled, his chest pressing mine, the friction igniting me, a wave building sharp in my core. "Let go," he whispered, voice breaking, lips brushing my ear, and I did. A quiet cry swallowed by his kiss, the rush crashing through me warm and wild, my legs tightening around him as he groaned, low and deep, tensing against me, spilling warm within, collapsing over me, breathless, spent. We lay there, tangled, the quilt a knot beneath us, his weight heavy, grounding, my hands tracing his back, slow, soft, the afterglow a fragile cocoon, moonlight glinting on his damp skin. His forehead rested on mine, lips brushing soft, tender kisses, his hand cradling my cheek, thumb tracing my jaw, damp with sweat and tears. "No regrets," he murmured, voice rough, and I nodded, fingers threading into his hair, holding him close. "None." My voice a whisper, the truth stark, unshakable. The night deepened, the house silent save our breaths. David's snores a distant echo, Sarah asleep upstairs, and we stayed there. Skin on skin, a quiet intimacy I couldn't release. The world beyond a shadow I'd face later, not now. Then a thud, sharp, heavy, shattered the hush, footsteps pounding down the hall, David's voice slicing through. "Lena? You awake?" My heart stopped, Eli's eyes widening as we froze, tangled, bare, the quilt barely covering us, panic surging cold through the heat. The doorknob rattled, his shadow looming under the crack. "Lena!" Louder, insistent, and Eli scrambled, pulling the quilt higher, his hand gripping mine, breath shallow. "Hide," I hissed, voice trembling, shoving him toward the closet as the door creaked, David's frame filling the threshold, eyes wide, fury dawning. "What the hell?" A roar cut short by the sight, the line we'd shattered crashing down, a reckoning we couldn't escape. The room spun as David stood there, his gaze raking over us, me half-covered, Eli clutching the quilt, the air thick with betrayal. "Lena, what is this?" he bellowed, voice cracking, stepping in, and I flinched. "David, Words failing as Eli tensed beside me, his breath fast, eyes darting. The night we'd claimed splintered, the yoga mat downstairs a distant memory, the thrill swallowed by the storm, leaving us exposed, teetering on the wreckage of what we'd dared.